Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Anastasia. I am 26 now and I live in London. I work in a Big Four consulting firm. Having been in consulting for a year and a half, I want to tell you my opinion on the famous myths or stereotypes about consulting and tell you whether, in my experience, they've been true or not. And I'm gonna say upfront, it's a mixed bag. I think some of them are spot on, some of them are quite ridiculous. So let's dive in. All right, number one is that consultants come to the client knowing the answer, and I have definitely found that not to be true because I think a lot of the time, and to say it quite candidly, I think we're winging it when we get there, and often you have some sort of framework, you have some sort of methodology that you maybe use in the area the client struggles in, but really every case is so different that you have to have an exploratory phase with the client and actually ask them and probe them. Stereotype number two is consulting is all about slides and PowerPoint. And let me tell you, as an analyst, which is what I am, I joined in a graduate scheme and it's coming to an end in November, I feel like 95% of my job is doing slides. That can involve different aspects, like obviously one aspect is the very basic formatting, making it look pretty, but also you really need to think about the storyline, how you're telling the story, the structure of the thing. If it's a workshop, what exercises are going to go in there. So I think there's a lot of stuff that can be around slides and PowerPoint, from strategy to, designing something. But ultimately PowerPoint, a lot of the time, is the way you communicate that to the client. So often if someone that I'm talking to is saying, you're a consultant, you literally just make slides, I kind of go to myself, yeah, because it's quite true. Stereotype number three, and the thing that maybe is the perception unless you actually work in consulting, is that in consulting you work with these big brands and huge corporations, and that's the type of work that you get all the time. That is definitely not true, and for several reasons. One is that you sometimes have small brands, you can have medium-sized firms that when you talk to someone, no one really knows about them, even within the firm, even though they are a client. I had my last client like that. No one has really heard of them, but they're doing fairly well for themselves, enough to afford consultants, basically. And I think that's the only criterion that there is. And that includes public sector. For example, the Home Office might be a client, or the Department for Transport might be a client. And also, weirdly, consulting firms sometimes use their own resources to do internal projects. So I know a few people who are doing a project for my own firm. So the firm is kind of paying itself to do the work, which is weird. It sounds weird, but that's how it often goes. Stereotype number four is that consultants, particularly like me who work in human capital, just cut costs and fire people. And I think the answer to this is twofold. One is sometimes that does happen. It does actually happen a lot of the time that you do that type of work. One of my projects so far, out of the three that I've done, was to cut costs through reducing headcount, and that's depressing. Fortunately, there is also the other side of the work where it can be more strategic, or for example, me being in change management, I have done a culture change project where we did a culture assessment and provided some recommendations of how the culture can be improved for the employees, which is the nicer side of human capital. Obviously, depending on economic climate and where a particular firm is at, you might not always get the nicer projects. For example, the culture stuff probably would die down a bit more during a recession when firms don't have as much to spend. But yeah, you do get a mix. It depends on how lucky you get with the project. Finally, stereotype number five is that consulting is a glamorous, high-paying job with a lot of nice travel. And you might guess from my intonation, it's not really true. It's especially not true when you're an analyst, because to be honest, I say that, I think it's just generally not very true, because firstly, pandemic happened, travel is not as frequent anymore. I think it's kind of reserved to the more essential stuff, when you have a workshop, when there's something you have to do in person. There's no longer a culture of being on client side Monday to Thursday. In my experience, I've had literally one work trip and it was to Milton Keynes, so it was not exactly exciting. If you live in the UK, you will know what I mean. But I'm quite happy with that. I think I have my evening routines that I don't really want disrupted. I have dance classes, I have other things, and it would not work for me to have that intense travel routine that used to be the norm pre-pandemic. So I'm quite happy with that. The other side is the high paying side. And quite honestly, I think given how much you work and how much you're stretched work-life balance wise, I really don't think you're compensated that well. And you're not compensated well, full stop, for say like living in London. It's really not a great salary when you start off as an analyst on a graduate scheme. I think the perk of that job is the doors it opens after, and the people you meet and the opportunities you get. Probably further down the line, yeah, like if you get to director and partner levels, like you will be very well paid. But to get to that point, it takes a lot of years of really being stretched. And if you divide the salary by the number of hours you've worked, it's probably going to be quite a sad number. So that was a very quick run through of 5 stereotypes that maybe partly I had before joining, some that people have generally about consulting. So I hope it's helpful if you are thinking of joining consulting. Everyone's experience will be different. Obviously mine is just one person's experience, but if it was interesting, let me know. Any other topics you want to hear, also let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.